I just wanted to make a video about a topic which is actually life-changing, and I once studied it like 12 years ago, and it's been a game changer. It's about memory and cognition, and I did it as part of my psychology, behavior, and neuroscience degree. And the stuff that I learned, I actually never forgot, and I managed to get a perfect score on my midterm for this exam. So I loved it so much. So I'm gonna go through with you some things for learning, like the best way to learn in order to retain information, and how to take information from a short-term memory to long-term memory. Okay, so anytime you want to learn something, let's say you've got some material in a textbook, for example, like it could be a concept, it can be facts, it can be something very dry, but when you take this information, so let's say you read a paragraph, the first thing you have to do is to try and relate this information to something you already know. So that's called anchoring. So you read a new concept and you think to yourself, oh, okay, well that sounds like this concept. And then you create different anchors. So you keep relating it to different things that you already are aware of. But then the next step is to actually ask yourself questions about what you're reading, reflect on it. It's similar to this, but it's also different in this way. And how would I apply this? And if I was explaining this to somebody else, what would I say? So you're not just reading the same line over and over and over again and hoping to just remember it. You're actually manipulating the information so that it gets stored in your short-term memory, and you're able to bring it up, to recall it using different anchors that you've put in place in your mind that will help retrieve that information when you need it. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is where you study actually matters. And not in the typical sense like, oh, you need to study in a library, you need to study in a quiet room. No, that's not what I mean. What I mean is studying in different places, studying the same subject, the same concepts in different locations actually helps improve your ability to recall this information when needed. For example, I've studied for exams at train stations, on coach buses, in hallways, in my bedroom, in libraries, so different locations. And every time I study the same thing in different places, I'm able to relate or connect the subject that I'm reading to my external environment. And that's important because the more associations you make with a subject, the more triggers that you have to recall that information. Also, studying in the same place where you're going to write an exam is also a great life hack. Some people don't have access to the exam rooms or the auditoriums where they're going to write an exam. But if you're in a smaller classroom, for example, and you are able, and you spend a lot of time in that classroom and you know your exam is going to be there, then that's also a great way to have better recall for your information. The third thing is how to transfer short-term memory to long-term memory. So as you know, we've got not just those two that I mentioned, but we've got working memory as well. So working memory lasts about 10 to 20 seconds, and it's like reading off a shopping list and then trying to recall what's on that. That's working memory, and then you probably forget after a minute or two. Short-term memory lasts a bit longer, 2 weeks to a month, maybe less for some, and that is information that you are able to understand, able to make associations with, able to connect to different things that you already know. But the key for long-term memory is actually transferring that memory from short-term to long-term. So how do you do that? So studies show that when you have memorized something, so let's say you studied for an exam, you know all the material, and then some people, like 2 weeks later, they've forgotten everything, or a month later. What you need to do to prevent that is actually go back to the material that you knew and you memorized and review it again a month or two later. If you do that again another month or two later, then that will successfully enable you to transfer short-term memory to long-term memory, and that will significantly increase the duration of time that you're able to retain that information. So you're taking it from short-term, which is like up to a month, to like a year or longer, right? It's all about the quality of the analysis and the quality of connections and associations that you're making to this new concept with what you already know. And that is going to help you. Number 3, so let's say we're gonna try to memorize a long sequence of numbers. That usually doesn't happen, and we usually don't need to. But let's say that we want to, okay? You can always do something called chunking. And you probably already do this if you're trying to memorize a phone number in order to write it down quickly in your phone. If it's a 7-digit number, you'll chunk the first 3 and you'll chunk the second half, which is the last 4 digits. And that immediately takes up less storage space in your mind, because instead of taking 7 digits and trying to remember them independently, you're actually effectively trying to just memorize 2. Okay, so geniuses. There's like there's a documentary of a guy who was memorizing pi to like the full extent. I think it was like 1,000 decimals, right? So how does he do it? When scientists sort of analyzed the way he was able to memorize it, they learned a very important thing about memory, and that our brain is actually much better at memorizing visual things. Okay? So what you can do in your day-to-day life is associate things with images, and that will make you more effective at memorizing things. So for example, let's say you had like a 5-digit number. You can place that number in an image or an object, like a truck or a car or a parachute, and you can start making your own associations with things that you need to memorize. Okay, so when I would study for medical school exams, I would actually draw out my material in very abstract ways. So I'm trying to remember an image. I think somebody took a picture of it and posted on their Instagram once. I was memorizing a congenital heart defect called tetralogy of Fallot. And in this congenital heart defect, the heart has 4 abnormalities. So in this image that I created for myself, I had made, the foundation was a boot, because the tetralogy of Fallot is eventually, in its essence, with all its defects combined, it led to a boot-shaped appearance of the heart on the X-ray image, right? So what I did was I put the 4 defects into my image, and I can recall it so vividly because I drew like a connection between one side of the boot and the other, and that for me represented an abnormal opening connection between both ventricles, so ventral septal defect, and then the aorta was displaced, and then one of the pulmonary arteries was really, really small. And the other thing was that there was a right ventricle, so the right side of the pumping ventricle was actually very enlarged, so that I drew that abnormally large in my picture. Everything's a bit exaggerated, but that's how I studied different syndromes. So yeah, I think imagery is a very powerful tool that we can utilize, and I don't think people utilize it enough. So the 5th thing is, I don't know if you've ever watched Sherlock Holmes, but he had a great technique for storing information and then being able to quickly retrieve that information, and that was called it's called a mind palace. It wasn't his, but everybody can create their own mind palace. So you pick your home, for example, or a location that you're very familiar with, and then you close your eyes and you visualize all the rooms. You take a walk through all the rooms, And in every room, you go and you place information. Isn't that neat? Like, you'll just be like, okay, this is all my information about anatomy, and you'll put it in like the wardrobe, and like each wardrobe has different closets, and you're like, I open this closet, this is like all the nerves, this is all this is all that. That's if you're studying medicine. But it can be applied to anything, right? And so in your mind, whenever you need to retrieve that information, you close your eyes, you go back to your mind palace, you take a walk through, and that imagery is going to help revive, recall, and retrieve that information that you've placed there, provided that you've put in a lot of anchors and connections. So yeah, that's my whole spiel about memory and cognition. I've literally, like I told you guys, I've studied this 12 years ago, never read the book again, don't even know where it is. But I just literally just read and implemented what I was reading at the time, and I managed to ace the exam. And the professor ended up writing me an email like, congratulations, you got 100%. And I was like, yay, I was so happy. So yeah, we'll just watch out for more tips and tricks on science and very nerdy things that I like. Okay guys, bye.